gospel story is one of my very favorites, and I'm hardly going to mention it today because I really want to talk about Job, and we never get to talk about Job, and he's just amazing. That story of Job is familiar to most of us, I think. The story of this wealthy, successful, and very righteous man. And the story goes that the devil comes to God in this court in the heavens and says, you know that Job, he really doesn't care about you. Let me send him some troubles and we'll see how long he lasts. And God agrees to this in this story. And so the devil goes down and wipes out Job's family and destroys all his wealth. But he leaves his wife, and his wife, you know, that's not a blessing. She's special. And so he's got all this woe, and then, you know, his health goes to pieces, and he's sitting on the rubble of his once fine home, and then he is comforted by his friends who come and explain to him why all this happened to him. And most of it is a variation on the theme, you must have done something terrible you're not telling us about. Job is several different genres kind of whooshed together, probably multiple writers, all attacking the same question that haunts us all. Why do good things happen? Bad things, why do I've rented lips today. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why should the righteous suffer? And all of these various authors have taken a swing at it, and it's been beautifully edited into one amazing story. But it is, on one level, a myth, as we see in the beginning with this court conversation in heaven with the devil and God. It's not a historical event. This is a way of talking about what's going on in human experience. And then it descends from the myth level, perhaps the way that human development has gone, to this very rational philosophical conversation, which frankly gets kind of tedious when all of his counselors are coming to talk to him about why God did this to him. And it winds up actually with the youngest of the counselors, who actually looks the best in the whole thing. And he isn't so much emphasizing, what did you do wrong, Job? Because by this time, Job has kind of moved out of a reverent acceptance of his state into something like rage. He's not exactly questioning the goodness of God, but he's certainly questioning his circumstances in a pretty angry way. And so this last fellow, Elihu, comes and starts questioning Job's lack of humility. And from that, it segues, without a response from Job, it segues directly into the third section of it, which is God's actual response to Job. And at the beginning of it, which is the section that we have in today's reading, God sounds a little rude. You know, basically he says, well, who do you think you are? Where were you when I made the heavens and the earth? Blah, blah, blah. You know, pipsqueak. And that's not very attractive. But I think that's at first blush. When you look at the whole big picture of where the next few chapters go, it's actually a very stunning description of a mystical encounter, a mystical response to this horrible, unanswerable question. God sweeps Job up into a vision of the power and beauty of the created world. You know, we're kind of used to that. We live in the world of PBS and nature and, you know, planet Earth, we've all seen those incredibly slowed down pictures of the whale leaping out of the water and turning in the air and falling. We've seen the birth of stars. And we know what tectonic plates are. And we understand magma rising from the center of the earth. We hold all these wonders actually in our vision and in our memory because we've seen it on TV. The poetry of Job at this point is an early version of planet Earth. It's taking Job into that cosmic awareness of the fabulous diversity and glory and beauty of all creation. And though we, in our own minds, have the technology to see the birth of stars, and even to imagine their end, yet, like Job, we cannot see or describe the hand that created all this, and it leaves us standing back, shivering, with wonder and mystery. And then we open the paper this morning, and we're back to Job's question again, aren't we? Right back there as we read about the behavior of Jerry Sandusky, and we wonder why in the world God would permit such crimes to be perpetrated upon children. It's certainly no answer to blame the victims. There's plenty of blame to go around amongst the adults, but should we also blame God? If it's a choice between blaming victims and blaming God, I'm all for blaming God, because God can take it. What Job offers us in light of evil and cruelty that we cannot account for is not an answer. Not an answer, not a mythical story that satisfies why these things happen, nor a philosophical answer that explains it and helps us to wrap our brains around it. All we are offered is this amazing step back of vision and encounter with the beauty and the power and the wildness of creation itself, of the coldness of snow and the brightness of light and the diversity of life forms. God takes Job into this exquisite cosmic vision. And from that place, Job's questions are not so much silenced as they are overwhelmed. And he is left with his unanswerable questions, and yet he is still the hero of this story because he chooses to stay in relationship with the God of creation. The power and beauty of creation itself compels him to remain in faithful relationship with God. This relationship with the wild is a very deep part of human spirituality. Many people who say they are spiritual but not religious embrace that wildness hungrily. My own brother nearly died on a high mountain in that wild search for God's grace and goodness in beauty and majesty. I remember a time when I was raging in my own grief. And at that time, I had just discovered gardening. And I was out there taking on the oxalis. In Central California, oxalis is invincible. And I was trying to get it out of the ground and root it out of my life. And I was going after even the nasturtiums, which were like, you know, taking, like kudzu in Pacifica. And my bachelor's buttons, which were only supposed to be 2 feet tall, grew to be about 5 feet tall, and were blocking things. I was hacking away at them, and, you know, in my fury over my infertility, I was raging against this ridiculous fertility in my front yard that I couldn't do anything about. And of course I wasn't addressing my own rage, because I was dismissing that, you know. And I remember one day as I was doing all this, and I was going after the oxalis, I looked up, and looking me in the face was an iris. A purple, plain old purple iris. There it was, right there. And it was like all the wind went out of my sails. Like that storm that Jesus calmed. It was just all of a sudden a dead calm inside. And I saw this flower. I mean, I had been battling my garden, and all of a sudden I saw the flower. And as I sat there taking that flower in, I became aware of another vision. I became aware of myself in the eyes of God, just as that flower was in my own eyes. That sense of God's presence and awareness of me in the same way that I was aware of that exquisite, marvelous, unimaginably beautiful thing. It was a moment. And it was only a moment. There was plenty more rage after that. I don't want to pretend that that fixed everything. It wasn't an answer. It wasn't an answer to my question. It was a reframing of life. To see the iris, the eye of God, face to face. I don't think we're going to comprehend the storms that come to us, and we will certainly not overcome every one. I love that song. It's very nice about how they cried to the Lord in their distress and He rescued them. But you know, sometimes you go down in the ship. All we can do, I think, as mortals, is stand before the beauty and wonder of creation and give thanks that we are part of it, a mystery so vast and yet so intimate we can hold it in our hearts. So I invite you to go into the wild with your raging and your aching heart. And I pray that there you find a word written for you by the breath of God. Not an answer, but a poem. Not a reason, but a mystery larger than our minds can hold, but perhaps also large enough to hold us. Amen.